I'm Joan Howe, and I'm the ranger at Tennessee National Wildlife Refuge. And today's topic is the power of pollinators. So, what is a pollinator? It's simply a species that pollinates. And to talk about what pollinating is, we really need to start with the flower. And look, I have an arrangement of flowers right here. And as you know, flowers are plants. There's this big category of plants called angiosperms. And in it, all the flowers have male and female parts. So we're going to talk just briefly about parts of a flower. I promise we'll get back to pollinating in just a minute. So we're going to use these white Easter lilies. And the neat part about the Easter lilies is all the parts of the flowers are really big in here. Now, if you don't have an Easter lily, you can go and Google parts of a flower on your computer and it'll show you a picture of just what we're talking about. Like this. So this I just Googled parts of a flower and I came up with this picture here, and it gives you really good indication. Now, the male parts of the flower are the stamen and the female parts are the pistil. So we're going to talk with the real flower and show you the stamen and the pistil. All right? So the male parts are called the stamen, and it's really got two halves to it. The filament, which is this long skinny rod here, and then the anther. And the anther has a pretty important part because it makes pollen. And look, when I get some on my finger, can you see the pollen on there? You know what pollen is? It's that yellow stuff that makes you sneeze in the springtime, especially. So then there's the female parts of the flower, and it is called the pistil. And we're really going to focus on two parts of the pistil. This top part that's really sticky, called the stigma. That big round thing right there. And then down way below is the ovary. And I'm actually going to cut a flower off so that we maybe could see a little bit better of the ovary. When you get down into the flower, see that part right there? That's the ovary. Now, so here's what happens when something gets pollinated. Simply, the pollen has to get from the anther and over and deposited on the sticky stigma. It's sticky for a reason, so that the pollen gets stuck on it. Now, it cannot get the pollen from its own anther onto its own stigma. It has to come from one flower to another one to be able to cross pollinate from another flower of the same species. I can't get pollen over here from another flower and put on this stigma, and it just doesn't work. Now, when the pollen gets on the stigma, this ovary down here will turn into a fruit. Now, when we think of fruit, we think of this apple here, don't we? Or grape, or blueberry. But did you know that all angiosperms have fruit? And what does the fruit hold but the seeds? The seeds are so important. Did you know you couldn't have a new apple or an Easter lily without the seeds? And the seeds can only be made when it is pollinated or fertilized, we call it. So, how does the pollen get from the anther over here to this stigma? Ta-da! Here comes the pollinator, the mighty pollinator. Now, I've got a little honeybee here, and it, you know, honeybees go from flower to flower because they collect pollen. So when he comes and gets his pollen over here, and then he comes and gets the pollen over here. Look what happens. Can you see? The pollen is all over his body. Now, when he comes and gets on this flower here, he might get some of that pollen stuck on the stigma there. And guess what? Now it's pollinated. And he might visit all of the flowers in a garden there, but remember, only the pollen from the same species of flower can pollinate this flower. And only when the pollen gets stuck on the stigma does the ovary become a fruit there. So it's a pretty important role in there, because think about it. We would have no new Easter lilies without pollinators, because the only way that the pollen gets from one flower to another is through our pollinators there. But you know what? There are a lot of plants out there. There are trees, there are bushes, there are grasses, there are grains in the field. They all require the pollinator to do their job so that we can have new trees, have new bushes, have grains to eat, have fruit to eat, have vegetables to eat. And who likes a good hamburger? I do. But you know, if you think about it, the hamburger patty comes from cows, right? And what do the cows have to eat? Grass. So if we have no plants, we also have no meat to eat. So our very existence requires a pollinator in there. That is so important. Thank you, Mr. Bee, for doing your job. Hey, but are there other pollinators than honeybees? Come on, follow me. We're going to go look at some real pollinators. Oh, here we are. I've got a holly bush here, and on the holly bush you can see that there are flowers. And it's hard to see it, but there are still stamen and anthers and stigma on there. But look what's happening. See if you can see some of the pollinators that are visiting these flowers. These are real pollinators that are pollinating this holly bush. And then when the flower gets pollinated, it actually, let's see if we can see that. There's the fruit starting to form, and then it'll be a red little berry, and inside the berry will have the seeds. But check this out. There are more pollinators than just the honeybees. Can you see some honeybees in there? But you know what? I see other flies and other flying insects and wasps and beetles and butterflies. There are many, many pollinators. Here's a little ladybug that's pollinating there. And guess what? There are even millions, sometimes billions of pollinators out there in this world doing their job, and they're much, much more than the honeybee or the bumblebee or the butterflies. There are even birds that are pollinators. Who knows about the hummingbird? Have you ever thought about it? Hummingbirds go from flower to flower. So guess what? They're pollinators too. And there's actually bats that pollinate. And there's little rodents and little mice and things that pollinate. So there's a lot of pollinators out there. And they are so important, because without the job that they do, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be able to live. So we want to thank all of our pollinators for working so hard all the time, because we really rely on them. The power of pollinators.